sure all the lawyers listening here know, you don't know what to do in life, you just go to law school. Seems like a good idea. You can kind of postpone the inevitable.
You've made it to Not Billable, the Lawtrades podcast that brings you bite-sized legal and business news updates, full event replays, and conversations with legal pros about what's going on behind the scenes every week. Stop the clock, put the timesheet down. It's time to get started.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Not Billable. I'm Matt Margolis. This podcast is hosted by Lawtrades. I have today one of the coolest guests I've ever had on, which I imagine all my other guests are going to get pretty pissed off that I just said that. Listen, guys, I love you all equally, but James is just super cool. James, I'm not going to do you justice. Can you give a little bit of background on yourself and what you're doing?
Thanks, Matt. I'm flattered. I appreciate that intro.
No
For a long-time listener, just a podcast in general, first-time guest. So this is fantastic. Let's see. So right now, I am Associate Counsel and Investments at Draper Associates venture firm. So that means I'm half internal counsel, half on the investment committee, kind of bridge the gap between legal things we want out of our deals and actually what companies we decide to invest in. Backing up a bit, went to Santa Barbara undergrad and didn't really know what to do after that, so worked in marketing for a year. Went to Duke Law School, as I'm sure all the lawyers listening here know, you don't know what to do in life, you just go to law school. Seems like a good idea. You can kind of postpone the inevitable. So did that, loved it there. Came back to the Bay Area, worked at Latham & Watkins for 2.5 years in their emerging companies practice. Liked working with startups, just hated all things biglaw, which I don't think I'm offending any of my old bosses. They could probably
That's not
tell.
a surprise.
They could tell from day one I wasn't partner track, but I tried to work hard on the deals I was assigned. I think the issue was when you're short on hours and you're supposed to ask for more work. I was never great at that part. I was like, I'm already working 10 hours a day. Let's just call that fair. So existential crisis, at the age of 27, 28. Went and decided I wanted to get my MBA and really round out my education, just blow it all up, jump ship. Went to Columbia, which has what's called the J-term program. So the J-term, regular MBA, instead of 2 years, you get it done in 18 months because you start in January. That's why it's called J-term. And then you have a full semester over the summer. And then you have a regular second year. So guy had already done 3 years of grad school. This was great. I could save some time. Also, you start sooner. So I'd applied in October, got in, started in January, as opposed to waiting another year.
Sure.
So did that. Then as I was set to graduate in 2020, guess what happened? COVID kind of hurt the job market for a while. Wasn't sure where I was going to land. I actually reached out to my now boss to see if any of his VC portfolio companies had openings, or at least that's kind of the anticipation when I was speaking with him, because I know that's a good way to find jobs. VCs are always trying to, they know who's just raised money and who's got headcount they need to fill. He had a proposition for me, which was, hey, you've got a legal background, which I know you're trying to shy away from, but I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of useful to me. So why don't you come in? You can help me save on legal bills, and simultaneously, you can train and be a VC while you're here. So come to all the company pitches, sit on the investment committee, all those decisions. And so that worked pretty well. I also didn't have any other options. This was the summer of 2020, and it's been a happy ending. 2.5 years later, still here at Draper, still working as our internal counsel, but also developing my own investment portfolio and board observer on a few companies. So I kind of run the gamut. Never really know what I'm going to do. Trying to be a Renaissance man in my own way, but it's that's not terribly succinct, but that's what I am and what I do.
It is. So you have a really cool background. I don't have that cool of a background, so I'm going to be honest with you. So hearing that, that was the dream and I tell you what, probably people listening have the similar kind of dream, right? Go to law school, maybe you do that dual JD MBA, and then you go work as this hybrid legal business professional. And you kind of found your way into it as opposed to that was the original path, right? It sounds like you went to law school. By the way, same boat, man. I went to law school because I was getting a master's in public policy. I remember this, and I remember seeing a lobbyist in the government. I was in Tallahassee, and the lobbyists that had no legal background were just like waving their arms around, like just like kind of flailing, like selling things, right? And then like the lawyer lobbyists, those guys were really cool because they knew their stuff. And I was like, all right, I guess I got to do this now. I'm like, I guess I got to go to law school. So I feel that, man. But it's really cool to see that you went to law school and you transitioned into this hybrid business legal role, especially coming out of Big Law, where a lot of folks go to Big Law and they're like, I'm going to be partner. I'm going to be partner. That's the dream, right?
Yeah, for some. It's funnily enough. Look, I love Latham and Watkins. Great training. It's a tough, Big Law is not for everybody. It just wasn't what I wanted. But it's like it's hard to not respect partners at Big Law just because God, how hard it is and how hard they still work. Maybe that was partly why I was like, I can't do that because I'm still getting emails from my boss's boss, Saturday morning, and I'm like, isn't the truth? Aren't you supposed to rest on your laurels at some point?
No, man. No, listen, when the billable hour requirement, I'll tell you this. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but like it was an Above the Law article where there's this Big Law attorney. I don't remember the firm, but he was so proud because he was billing 3,000 hours a year, and he was like, and it was like this crowning achievement of an article. I think it was a little bit right, like tongue in cheek, because Above the Law is like this is almost very close to not humanly possible. But this individual was just like. He's like, look what I did. And I read that, and I'm like, maybe, I don't know about you, but I was like, maybe law isn't for me. I don't know if
it's not Big Law.
It's a grind. Needless to say, it's a grind, but you left the grind because you had different aspirations, which I'm seeing that more and more from folks, right? They're leaving the traditional path of going to become a partner, senior partner, shareholder, what have you, and then just kind of building the book and then eventually retiring at the ripe age of 1,001, and then finally being done with law. Maybe you're like of counsel or whatever at that point. But you didn't do that. You did something different, which I think was really cool. So what compelled you to go to get your MBA? Like, what made you think, hey, I should go to Columbia?
Yeah. So little background there. So when I actually went to Duke, I did envision a joint JD MBA degree, and at least originally. And the way it works, there's sort of a catch-22 with MBAs where you need a good experience to pass the application, to actually get in there. You need to have like done something somewhat impressive up till then. And then you and so when you are trying to get into a JD MBA program as like straight out of undergrad, it's hard to do. You don't really have the traction yet. So my original plan was, what you can do is you can get started at the law school, and then it'd be your third year would be just MBA, and then your fourth would be a hybrid. So because it's 4 years if you do it all at once. Sure. I had some family stuff come up. Mother passed away when I was in law school, so bit of a bummer. Obviously, I stuck it out at law school, but I was like, I'm not doing 4 years here. And who knows? It might not have worked out anyway at the time, but like I had always had that vision for me in my head, and then I'm like, crap, I'm stuck in Big Law, which wasn't terrible, sure. But it was something I was kind of like I was revisiting a goal more than something that had sparked in me. What was the catalyst when I was decided, screw it, now's the time, it's Columbia. I'd started dating my now wife, and I remember being close to hitting hours my first year, which, by the way, the bonus relative to salary of first-year associates is tiny. Not that, at least when I was doing it, was like 10,000 on 180 salary, whatever like the Cravath scale was at the time. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's nothing to sneeze at, but like that's a very low percentage relative to hours worked. And I was like, I'd rather like go on a few extra dates with this girl, hoping that it leads to something that would actually matter for the rest of my life. And so as soon as I did that, I was like, you know what? Maybe my priorities are like kind of going this way. What do I actually want to get out of life? And then, the Columbia JD or J-term program, I was like, look, this is great. I can start right away. I don't have to apply, wait a whole year, and then start. And then 2 more years after that before I re-enter the workforce, because like I do need to make money. I'd been in grad school for long enough. And I thought, even if I left my Latham job straight to another in-house position, I just don't know that'd be enough of a pivot for me. I love the tools that Latham gave me, and I love understanding the mechanics behind venture financings, which is frankly what makes me valuable as an attorney. but it's not what I wanted to be my principal thing. It's just not my skill set. I'm not formal enough to be a like very, very good firm lawyer. I needed to find something else. So that was it, and that's why Columbia. Also, I'd always wanted to live in New York, and I wasn't disappointed. It's fantastic. I'm a West Coast kid. I'm back here now, but like, God, what a city.
That must have been a blast, man.
It was.
And I like the way you're saying that. Like, there is a formality to working that traditional lifestyle. You know, like the traditional big law, and not just big law, right? Like general firm life, and to do this kind of hybrid thing that you're doing, right? This business, legal, strategic business advisor / legal advisor. You really do need to be fluid, flexible, that you can roll up your sleeves and you're not this just very formal mentality. I could feel it from the conversation we're having that like I could be in a business conversation with you and you're like, listen, this is how it works. Easy. This is it.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I've done at this job is taken on some legal interns. I took a legal, like a rising 2L. So the summer before you join a big firm, before your OCIs. Yeah. And I just had so much fun being like, look, they're going to tell you a million things. Here's like the 3 things that'll get you 90% of the way there. And so that's just how I try and approach things. And look, when I went to MBA program, my thought was I'm going to leave legal totally in the dust. And then I graduate and I'm like, you know what? That's actually kind of what makes me valuable right now. And maybe forever. And so I can't totally ditch it. But I'm pretty happy with where I've landed.
I respect it. I think it's the coolest thing ever. So I'm going to ask you this because my background is not in VC. My background was, funny enough, was in private equity. So it's just a different environment, right? It's a totally different environment, especially over the last 2 years. I think even during COVID for you, it must have been a wild ride because a lot of the tech market was booming. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on when you came in 2020 and what the environment looked like, and I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So backing up quickly, my boss and the managing partner of the fund is Tim Draper, who's been doing this for 40 years. I don't know, a while. He's seen cycles, so he is more equipped to actually talk about, sure. What I've been here for 2.5 years, so I've seen like a little mini roller coaster, and he's talking in terms of eons. What I will say from when I first joined, fall 2020 through, the first half of 2021 at least, we'd be taking pitch meetings. They'd say words, and these are mostly on Zoom, which is convenient, and they're all over the world. They might say, hey, we're doing this NFT project that does X, Y, and Z, and it's some kid he's like 21, in a very nice apartment. You can tell because it's on Zoom. And I'm like, I don't really know where this is going. And then they're like, they're doing the call, 30 minutes perhaps. So I go, I don't really think this is for us in my head. And they're like, actually, we're oversubscribed. We've already raised $30 million. This is just, for the next round. I'm like, okay, so my expectations need to totally shift because I thought I had, or not me particular, but I thought, we're on this side of the table. I'm here to like judge. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm judging, but like it doesn't really matter right now because it's so frothy. And so that trickled down into terms when we are, at least at that point in the market, when we were, trying to join a round, you might have to just swallow your pride and say, we're not getting what we kind of want out of this deal, but we just gotta allocate this capital somehow. Shift to now, we are, we're seeing more, not so much down rounds, but some flat rounds. Companies that are raising at the valuation they raised at 6 months ago. What we tell our portfolio companies as investors is raise as much as you can, spend as little as you have to, cut burn, obviously. There's this magical number with burn rate that's 350,000 net, which only applies to some of the larger companies, but if you can get underneath that, then you're much more likely to succeed, etc. So we're having a lot more conversations along those lines. It's it's funny. As much as I would enjoy like having more leverage with new companies now when we're talking about initial investment, that's kind of offset by the conversations I'm having with existing portfolio companies where I'm like, I really want you to keep going and succeed, and I'm feeling this tough market for you right now, and there's pros and cons to each.
No, it's so funny you say that about the NFT project thing.
Yeah.
Web 3 in like 2020 is probably like AI now, if I had to guess. It's probably very similar to what AI, because AI is, if you even bring that up, like you're raising X amount of dollars. I think I just saw recently, I don't remember, it might have been like company pre-revenue, $150 million raise at $1 billion valuation. Like something in the, I think it was AI marketing.
There's a lot of, that's definitely kind of the new hot thing on the block. Look, the blockchain is still a magical word if it's used correctly. And it's funny, like, I won't name the guy, but the kid who was oversubscribed, we somehow got in the round. They then raised at a higher valuation, 6 months ago, and I think they're still doing fine. So, like, it's sometimes I'm skeptical for no good reason, but it is it was definitely a tough market, and like you can't have any ego on your side of the thing, and not to be ageist, but like young founders are great. If you're scoring, those are good points because these are people who are motivated, going to work all the time at it. And they don't know enough to be like afraid, so they're just gunning,
going through. Yeah. Happy to pivot, willing to do whatever. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just I don't know. It makes me laugh a little bit just because like there's all these jokes on the internet. Twitter, right? Twitter is a cesspool, and VC Twitter is like the funniest thing, and everyone will talk about it, right? Like the pivot over to AI, but also like the difference between the two macro environments. And I think now the other thing I've been hearing recently is, what is it called? Like up and name only, up round and name only, I think is what people are calling it, where it's an up round, but the terms kind of to what you said before are much more in favor of VC as opposed to in 2020 when you're like, I'm just trying to get in. I'm just trying to get in the round. Yeah,
you're trying to get in. You're seeing a lot of safes. Look, we do a side letter, so we get a little extra protection there. But no, it's funny. You can kind of tell who's got leverage, whether you're using the word safe or like, please send us a term sheet so we can do a price round. It's a little different.
Yeah, man, it's a different market. Well, I think it's really cool that you're doing that. And listen, you said yourself that you're also not just acting as legal counsel, but you're also independently acting as a board observer. You're also acting as a investor yourself in some of these companies. Is that right?
Yeah. So at least when I joined, I was probably 80-20 legal, just because you're trying to be useful immediately. I'd say now I'm closer to 50-50. And the 50 that's not legal, it's meeting new companies. So we're industry agnostic, so I know little about a lot. Every time there's like a specific company that's doing something very esoteric, I got to drill down, rely on outside experts to kind of figure out what they're actually saying. But we have some general investment principles that we try and layer onto everything we see, so that we actually are not coming in like Bambi every time. You do have some sense of pattern recognition, which is a lot of what VC is. So it's your standard Shark Tank type pitches. You hear someone talk for it'd be a 30 to 45 minute initial meeting over Zoom. They'll run through their deck, which God, I love those. Seen a few thousand. Here's the problem. Here's how we're solving the problem. Here's how the founding team is special. Try and ask some intelligent sounding questions. Wrap your head around the product, whether there's traction. Do some follow up, usually on our own. It's funny. Google is a great resource, legal or investor. It's it's where we go first, and then we work with our investment committee, decide whether actually we're gonna make an offer and at what price, and then I switch hats, put on my lawyer hat again, whether we're sending a term sheet or a safe and side letter, depends on frankly like the size of the investment, what's more justified. And then I am, it's funny because I'll have gone from meeting with a CEO 2 or 3 times saying, hey, tell me about your company. Hey, I like your company. Let's learn more. Be like, I really like your company. Answer these last few questions and maybe we've got a deal. And then my 4th conversation will be, hey, here's a term sheet. Please put me in contact with your outside counsel. So, if they have any issues with our terms, I can then, be a little more, clear about like what we want and what we need. And as soon as the term sheet's signed, usually it's actually helped where I've had these. They know me. They know I'm interested in their company, and I'm not a guy who's getting tagged in at the last second to say, hey, like now I'm going to argue for all these things that we want that you have to give up. It's not a zero-sum game. As soon as the term sheet's signed, then we tag in our external counsel, and they help with the actual drafting and diligence of the documents. But no, it's fun, and usually it works because it's kind of like a lukewarm intro until you have to get down to brass tacks, which is the term sheet. But I found that it's worked pretty well when it's clear that it's a partnership.
really funny you say that point, because I've noticed that as being an in-house attorney myself, and like all my buddies who are in-house attorneys, they say the same thing. They all come in, if they're looking at a target, right, as that business person. You build that relationship, and then you close it as legal, and those deals are such better deals, friendlier negotiations, friendlier terms, just overall a better experience for both parties than, you're right, when like outside counsel's thrown like a term sheet, or outside counsel is thrown in at the end to draft up a term sheet, and they're like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what the relationship is. I don't know what maybe I know the relationship as in like I know what my client wants, but I don't know what everyone wants. I can't really do this holistically. So I think that's cool. And also I think you're kind of describing the difference between in-house attorneys and outside counsel, right? Like outside counsel it's just more buttoned up. It's just a different kind of experience. And let me ask you this, like, have you noticed that? Have you seen a difference between like yourself and how you present the deals and how you work through deals as an attorney and like your outside counsel?
Yeah, so our outside counsel, we use Brubaker Law Firm. Shout out Jared, fantastic. They are great, and they've been working with us since I've been here, and with Tim for 6, 7, 8 years, something like that. So they're what's most important with an external counsel is what they're great at, which is knowing your client's needs. So, you know, if I were at Latham and I'd gotten comments back from the opposing counsel, I didn't have discretion to say, oh, that doesn't actually matter. Here are the 3. There's 10 things that are marked up. I can throw out 3 off the top because they don't matter. We'll live with it. You don't have that discretion as an outside counsel if you don't know your client. So that's the most important thing, is streamlining negotiations by knowing what actually matters and what you can focus on. There's still always questions after each turn, hey, this is kind of an edge case, what do you think? Generally, as in-house counsel, I just want to get the deal done. I think that's the biggest piece. Say, like, I know in my head what our pillars are that are going to keep us strong and secure through the next round and what we'll be comfortable with. You start with more so that you can get back to those. But I know in my head like what we want to live with. That's the biggest difference, I think, with in-house and external, is that level of discretion. Again, though, good external counsel can kind of bridge that gap. What I will find when I'll give an example. I sent a safe and side letter to a company a few weeks ago that the founder knows Tim. They've worked together previously. They're quite friendly. Good handshake deal on the terms, no problem. Send it to counsel. It's a big law firm. Obviously don't need to say who, but 2 weeks after I send this safe, standard YC safe, side letter, page and a half, I get 3 guys from their firm copied on this email, and huge markup. Changed the 1 or 2 material terms that I don't know where they came from, and in my head I'm thinking, like, your incentives are totally different than ours, because I don't bill by the hour. It's the name of the podcast. I know that the CEO and my boss get along very well, and both just want this deal done, but there's this extra pressure on their side to, I'm not saying it's specific to this deal, it's just to get it's to, make this difficult. And, I'm also not terribly confrontational when I don't want to be. And so I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, oh, man, like, I don't like the way this makes me feel inside. I got to have this argument now. I just want us all to get along. So, that's a scenario like that. Again, I try and focus on what are important terms, get back to the material terms, what had been agreed upon, and what we can live with. But just like big picture, I just want to get it done. And then what's a consequence of that scenario is, so we get this deal done, should be shortly, as counsel versus working with the company counsel, I'm not going to leapfrog them and talk to the founder. Sure. I can't. That's not good ethics. However, once they're a portfolio company, there is the potential to say, hey, I would like you to be cognizant of legal expenses generally going forward, because burn rate is an issue. And so when a deal is something that you think can be done simple, just be sure to communicate that to your counsel.
I like this
so
strategy.
They don't take it as, hey, I'm going to fight tooth and nail for every piece of this relatively standard agreement. And I think that's valuable. Like the legal expenses, I mean, we know they'll kill these companies, and it's usually when when it's someone trying to give money to the company, it should be relatively straightforward.
I couldn't agree with you more. I have a story like that too, where I had a deal where it wasn't even the target; it was a management company that we were going to be utilizing. And I remember big law firm, same as you. I won't say the name. Everyone listening to this knows who it is. And I got,
You probably guess.
Yeah, right. I got a 125-page agreement, 125 pages, and I remember looking at it, and I had like a standard form, easy, neutral. Always start. I think that's probably like the mantra of an in-house attorney. I keep things neutral because you're right. Like I don't want to fight. I just need to get the deal done, and everyone makes out well. Everyone's happy, right? Great. So I remember getting that, and my external counsel, like what you're describing for your external counsel, very with it, understands, and he looks at it and he goes, "I'm not using this because this is going to take 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get through. It's going to cost X amount of dollars." And ultimately, he sends back another agreement and says, "We're using this paper. We're going to use this paper. Why? Because it has all the terms that we all care about. We'll get the deal done. We're going to save everyone time and money." And ultimately, we did get to use our paper. And my understanding is that management company is still using that paper. So why show value? And I think you're right. It is that perverse incentive of like the billable hour, right? I mean, 2 weeks of work is 2 weeks of work.
It's that, and it's trying to show value, which that's a more sympathetic way of putting it than just callously saying they're purely trying to bill hours. Like I get it. You want to show that you were listening or that you contributed, and maybe they genuinely in their heart of hearts believe that every single piece of red ink was necessary, but it's not in the client's interests. And from in-house, that's very obvious because, like you said, we're just trying to get the deal done.
That's it. At the end of the day, you've got a CEO that's like, look, I don't care. Same with me. Like I had a CEO who's like, I don't care. Just make sure costs look like this, the deal looks like this. These are the terms we care about. And you're right. And it's a bit of a disconnect. But that being said, once you find counsel like you're describing that gets it, it's great. These deals are so much easier. Less headache, less stress. It's just, and then you look great as in-house counsel because that's just an extension of you. And then you're like, all right, I'm killing it. I got this done.
It's great. It's great.
I tell you what, man. So let me ask you this, because and this is selfish because I just want to do this personally. I'd love to know this dynamic of being like counsel above these portfolio companies, because they all have potentially, right, depending on what round they're in. They may have in-house counsel, they may have a few inside counsel, or they may rely on outside counsel to do most of the legal work. What does that dynamic look like? I just find it fascinating.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on the size of the company. Like if a company has just raised a Series Seed, so they're like usually fresh into our portfolio, they might have external counsel, but they certainly don't have a GC or anybody like that. So what I try and offer to these companies is, look, you want to just bounce something off of me, I am free. I do not cost you anything, and it's in both of our interests for you to go to me before you go to anybody else.
Yep.
So usually those conversations where I can actually provide value is around structuring future rounds. They might say, hey, look, we've got runway for 6 months. We're trying to extend that. We want to raise $1 million. Should we try and meet with VCs to get a term sheet or what? And I'm like, look, convertibles are your friend in this scenario where you're just trying to raise a little bit to bridge, and how they can think about a cap or a discount relative to the next round. If they might call and say, hey, we've got an IP issue here, and then I say, hey, look, I'm glad you talked to me. I don't know. So you're gonna have to engage specialty counsel for that. That's just being a free legal resource is kind of what I want to do in those scenarios, and I think it's generally helpful in terms of getting the rounds done. And then as they get larger and they have their own counsel, their own GC, I work as the liaison between obviously the portfolio company and the rest of our investment committee. So that'll be additional rounds. So if we've invested at the Series Seed and they're raising the A, my main motivation is to make sure that our most important rights get carried over.
Sure.
And the interest of clarity, generally that's like pro rata rights, board observer seat if we have one, a few other things. And basically what I'm trying to do, and I hope usually this works, is because I have a good relationship with these portfolio companies, I know ahead of time that they are working, well, they've got a term sheet, and a lot of times we have approval rights, so it's not just being polite, they have to, but it's just how it helps to be polite. I know that the new round's coming. I make sure, I'm like, look, please send us the docs as soon as they're available, instead of like getting them in. Nothing worse than you get docs sent on, Friday that's like, hey, we're trying to close Monday. These are in substantially final form, even though you're seeing them for the first time, even though you have strict veto on this round, and none of your rights transferred over. When that happens, you're like, all right, well, this is a miscommunication here, because this is bad for everybody. But trying to make sure, again, even when we're not participating, because usually we do our pro rata, but assuming in this case we're not, it's still in my interest to get the deal done. I don't want the company to spend more on legal than they have to ever. And so as long as we can continue some of our basic rights over, and generally that's a win-win for everybody, then that's my priority. I'm not trying to fine-tooth comb every agreement necessarily, or raise every edge case. Same thing, like, I want you to get this done so you can get back to building. That's in everybody's interest. So help me to help you by getting it to me early, please. And I try and communicate at the start, like, hey, their term sheet doesn't address our existing rights. That's fine. They wouldn't know as these new lead investors. But like, just please keep in mind these things that are important to us. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, and you need our approval to finance the round. So like, you kind of
have to keep this in mind.
But like, I'm not trying to like hold that in my back pocket. Sure. I'm trying to tell you right now, just so we can get it done.
I tell you, James, like what you're describing, I wish more attorneys were like it. It's this business minded, and it's also the business acumen to be like, look, I can be professional and I can be very friendly to make sure things get done. I don't have to be adversarial. I don't have to fight. Mm-hmm. We can all win at the end of the day. So I appreciate that. If you're listening to this podcast, please listen to James and please be like this, because
please.
I'm tired of dealing with the meanest, crappiest OC ever. Like, I just want to break. Well, James, listen, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the insight. I think all the listeners greatly appreciate it. So let me ask you this. If someone wants to reach out and maybe ask you a question or two, just to understand your career path, what you've done, and how do they get a hold of you? Do they get a hold of you through socials or?
I'm on LinkedIn, James Walker, Draper Associates. But feel free to shoot me a direct email, james@draper.vc. Pretty easy to remember. I'm always happy to chat. When I tell people how I usually get asked more, how do you become a VC, than how do you become a VC lawyer, which I would think is fair. I'd say it's, you got to have a hook of some sort. Mine was, lucky enough, law, having a legal background that was able to save my boss legal bills and then kind of get my foot in the door, and then you learn as you go along. If you're interested in it generally, though, happy to chat. And it's a pleasure talking with you. A lot of fun. Like I said, listen to about 1 million podcasts. Never been on one. It's been a lot of fun.
I appreciate it, man. This is an awesome episode. And for all you listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out also on LinkedIn and Twitter to keep up to speed with what we're doing. Catch you on the next one.